Hello and welcome to Chile Talk. I'm Neil Davidson. This is I'm with Pete Lee, but also somebody else who Pete will introduce. This is our long-awaited follow-up to the topic of speaking English in Chile. So Pete, I will let you introduce our guest.
Thanks, Neil. Well, yes, we're really pushing the limits of our technology here, of course, because Neil, you are in Cordoba, I think?
I'm in Cordoba, yes, that's right. In a rustic setting in Cordoba province, in Argentina.
Yes, don't let the Barbary take over your civilization out there.
No,
I'm in Santiago de Chile at the moment, and we also have our first ever interviewee, Miguel Quiniao of Temuco. Hello.
Hello, everybody. I am so happy to be the first one here. So I hope this one works perfectly. Okay.
Perfection is not something we really aim to achieve on Chile.
Okay. Okay. We'll have to see how our technology goes. We'll have to get the technology flowing smoothly, because obviously it's the most important thing in our productions is the quality of the technology. And we're going to talk to Miguel, who is an English teacher, among other things, about speaking English in Chile, which is a topic that is very fascinating. So please, Miguel, how did you learn English? I mean, you seem to speak English extremely well. How did you learn?
When there was this national program when I was a student, but it would start when you were at the 5th grade or something. Yeah, probably. And then it would continue in higher school, but I was so fascinated by the language. So by the end of 8, I was able to utter some words, and I decided to study everything by myself. And then I've met one of my first English teacher, and she encouraged me to continue with it, and then it became something that I was very into it. Then, of course, I got interested in the music, the culture, books, everything. So it became a sort of my passion, but I didn't see a career at that moment. For me, it was more like a hobby, you know. But then when the time came to become a professional, there were like 3 areas that I could go for if I wanted to be related or engaged with English all the time. That would be a translator, or become some sort of professional in tourism, or a teacher. So my mother was a teacher, so I guess for me it was easy to follow a teaching career.
Yep.
And can you remember what started your interest originally? I mean, these things can be quite mysterious.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, I tell the same story all the time. There was this American TV show. It was about a girl. She would freeze the time, something like that, by putting a place in her palms together. And for any reason, something happened to the audio, and I could hear that the girl was speaking another language in the background. And then I was like, wow, the lips are not matching what she's saying in Spanish. And it was like a glitch. But then I thought, wow, this is not from Chile. At that moment, from me, it was the world was Chile only. And probably the girl was from Santiago, the capital. But then I've learned there was like a whole culture, a whole world out there beyond my boundaries. So that moment I discovered that there were other people, and I was interested in this character in particular. So that's why this fascinating thing started.
So we owe your career and your dedication to English teaching to some bad lip syncing, essentially.
Exactly. Yes. And then came the music and many other things that I really needed to understand. So, you know, the first music are some artists from Europe mainly, and they were speaking English with a very heavy accent. So that was when I discovered accents, because I was more into American English when I was growing up, because that was the English I was exposed to. But then when I started taking English lessons formally, I had access to other accents and dialects, and it was a complete new world to me. And I could hear words pronounced differently. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. Although I could not really honed my skills, because it was really hard. You know, there's a big difference saying, like, not only in terms of pronunciation, but also in grammar. When somebody asks you, for example, have you got that versus do you have that? So that is like it's a new world. And in my brain was collapsing and everything. But it was happy. It was a happy moment.
Yes.
You seem to have gone more in the direction of British English. I mean, just to judge by the way you speak, you sound more British than American.
Probably, yeah. Well, I picked from here, picked from over there, and different places, so I don't know exactly.
Now, so people are often quite critical of language teaching in Chilean schools. And by language teaching, we really mean English teaching, don't we? Because people, I mean, there's one or two schools in Santiago that do Chinese and things, but I mean, it is mainly English. Is that fair, or have things improved?
For example, I am from the south of Chile, so you've got, well, English is more popular, to be honest, but some of the colonies, like German colony or the French colony, very small communities, but they have their own schools and their own teaching techniques. So English is something that you can have more access to. And in my days, when I was a student, I think the approach that was used at that moment was a more like a grammar translation approach. So you were translating sentences, so you had like a very clear idea of the grammar, right? But the speaking was not something that they would have put. I mean, by them I mean teachers. They didn't pay much attention to that. It was mainly write sentences in English. That was my teaching experience. And then I saw how it evolved into a more communicative approach, and also saw a more task-based learning approach and a collocation. There were so many other things that I saw. But then when I went to college, I really learned how it worked. And then, of course, I got more familiar with it. But the way I see it in Chile is still like a blending of many things. You know, teachers, they do whatever it takes to make students speak or write in English.
Of course. Also, what you describe, how you were taught, you know, it might be somewhat old-fashioned, but it does sound quite rigorous. There was obviously a real desire there to get people to learn.
Yeah, there were. I mean, it all depends on the school. It would depend on the teacher. I had very good teachers. Some others were not really, you know, like engaging. Some others were a little bit boring. But I would try to get the best out of every person that I bump into.
Absolutely. It's too much to ask, isn't it, to have many good teachers. I think if in one school you have 3 good teachers, then you're doing very well, really. But that's my experience as a former schoolboy.
Yeah,
that's right. I can't ask too much. So Pete, sorry, I'm monopolizing the interrogation here. Perhaps you'd like to.
You've probably mastered the technology, Neil, and you're just jumping in.
I find it just simply consistent sitting here in front of my computer, and they make it all sound so difficult, don't they?
Yes, yes. I mean, it's so interesting to think of Temuco and the zone of the South at the moment, of course, which is in the news all the time here in Santiago, and the changes that must have happened over the last, say, 30 years, including in terms of, obviously, there's this community that identified with its German roots that arrived, in the 1860s, perhaps around that sort of time. And then there's obviously the Mapuche identity, and that community obviously consolidating a great deal. And also this global influence from the English language coming in through information technology and international trade. And I'd be interested to know how you see the changes in the zone around Temuco over your lifetime, Miguel.
Okay. Yeah. When I was growing up, I saw different features, traits on people's faces, different names, spelled differently. So you knew immediately that you were not, or that you were in a very, in a wonderful community, let's say. But it was very difficult to understand them all, because it was like you just, since you don't really live in it, you just see what is on the surface. It's like the apex of the iceberg. You see only the tip of it, but what's under there, you don't really see it. My grandmother, she was more related into the German culture. I really don't remember the German culture in my life. I only remember the food. That's all what I remember. And then my mother would take me to the countryside because I was not ready for school yet. So I would work with her. She would take me there. She was a teacher, a rural teacher. So she was more into the community. She saw people and she saw the conditions they lived. And it was really, really shocking at first. My mom became like a pioneer. She would even take clothes, shoes, some other stuff to these communities that were a little bit left behind or were neglected by the authorities. And of course, they were using words, they would pronounce things that we didn't say at that moment. Once you spend a moment, a time with them, and then you go back to the city, people in the city would notice immediately that you were from the countryside because the way you pronounce the word. And I was like, people are not ready for this. They are not really, the city was growing very, very fast. And the countryside communities were becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And the language was being lost, let's say. People would only utter some expressions, not full sentences. But now it's different. Now there is more an intercultural approach. So today, there are a lot of people interested in promoting the language. And still the debate is it a language or is it a dialect? So I don't know how I would describe that phenomenon. I don't know if it is a language. Probably it is, but it's not recognized by the international community. So I believe it's a dialect. Sorry?
Can I just jump in? Sorry. So could you describe this language or dialect you talk about? Because of course in Temuco you've got the Mapudungun influence, you've got the German. So what is this rural language that you're talking about, this dialect? What are its kind of characteristics?
It has like a phonetics features that you can really notice. It's very noticeable, right? There is the combination of a TR, right? That is like being dragged. So you're gonna hear a lot of people saying, let's say the word trabajo. You're gonna hear trabajo, trabajo. So most of our politicians were raised by Mapuche women. So most of them tend to speak like that. because they would imitate the dialect of the person who was being taken care of them, right? And at that moment, it was the German who wrote the alphabet, the phonetics alphabet of the Mapuche people. So they would use their symbols to exemplify the sounds, right? There was no access to this international phonetics alphabet that everybody knows right now. So the moment it was just the German. So even for us, it's difficult to learn the language because we don't recognize the German symbols, of course, you know?
Yes.
Interesting. And sorry, if I could just go on, because the Mapudungun language, the Mapuche language itself, now, that's in very rapid decline, I gather, unfortunately, in my opinion. And of course, it's inevitably it's less spoken, I'm sure, in Temuco than in the countryside. Indigenous languages tend to hang on much better in the countryside. But do a lot of your students at school are they Mapudungun speakers? How prevalent is that?
Well, first of all, I was born in Osorno. Osorno is it's another city in the south. And then I moved to Temuco because I was pursuing a master's degree. But then I decided to stay here in the area and work here. And it was, yeah, you're right. It was stunning. I have a 99% of students with a Mapuche heritage, but they don't speak the language. They don't. Only their grandmothers, grandparents, they speak the language, right? Because I think it's a natural thing when everybody speaks Spanish. So you're gonna try to go with the flow, to be honest, right? If you want to have better job opportunities, then probably everybody's gonna say, okay, I'm going to speak Spanish better than my mother tongue because it would open many other doors in life. And this isn't about that Chile is it's been neglecting that. It happens everywhere, right? But I've seen a tendency to at least get some of the words and use them on a daily basis. Now we understand most of it. For example, I know what Temuco means right now because the suffix co means water, right? So Temu is a kind of tree. So I say Temuco is water from this tree or water that comes from this tree, okay? So we are learning little by little some terms, but we cannot put them together into one sentence without using Spanish, right? So I have to say, Spaniards really did a good job when they came here.
It's pretty much the case everywhere, isn't it, as you say, with the strange exception of Paraguay, which I must one day try and learn how that, where everybody speaks Spanish and Guarani, amazingly, even though there's been so much immigration in Paraguay as well, but how they achieve that, I don't know.
Well, they had the advantage of almost being completely wiped out in the war in the 1860s.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah. So they rebuilt.
They needed to rebuild themselves as a country, and most of them they were left. Women left, and women would speak the language, the dialect, in order to avoid, letting others what they were saying, and they would transfer that to their children, and so on and so forth.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we've slightly taken this away from the question of speaking English in Chile, which was our original plan, wasn't it? Pete, I'm sure you have more questions on the subject that you have prepared.
On the question of English. Yes, I'm very interested to know your perception of how young people, both children and teenagers, are picking up their English. What is the relationship between formal education and their access, obviously, to the internet and an infinite amount of information in English, that they probably pretty early on realized there's more information available in English than there is in Spanish, I imagine.
Yes. Well, at school is always something that is formal, and whatever thing that comes from school is going to be, well, people are going to be like, okay, but if it comes from games or interaction with other people, they will be more interested in that if it comes from school, right? And at school, it is a formal training where you teach them reading, you teach them vocabulary, and listening and speaking, like in separate forms, or you can do a whole combination of everything. But it is the formal teaching of a language versus what happens on the internet is that you've learned the English through interaction with others, and you don't learn the grammar of it. It comes naturally. It's like the way you learn your mother tongue in a natural environment. And from time to time, somebody corrects you a little bit or fix your the way you speak. But this is what is going on when kids or children in general are playing video games, for example, or listening to their music. It comes more natural. But if you transfer that into Chilean settings, there are so many things that you need to fix, grammatically speaking, and also in terms of pronunciation. And you need to contextualize some stuff. They hear expressions in movies. I'm not going to say them out loud. And they replicate those, and like if it was normal, right? The swearing, I mean, like in movies, all of a sudden a guy snaps, goes crazy, and start cursing out loud, right? But the movie makes them sound so natural that the kids tend to believe that. I mean, I was in class when there was one student saying, "What the?" And I was like, "Oh my God, you don't say that." But it was in the movies last night, and everybody was saying that. And I was like, I mean, yeah, but not you. Come on. And it was quite interesting. So you need to correct that. So it's great that they are using it, but I mean, the teacher has to be there just to say, okay, this is what we say it in a proper way, or this isn't what we actually would say. Okay? Yeah.
Yes, I think the idea of swearing has evolved so much in my lifetime. I remember when there was less recorded information available before the internet, and it was possible to have a policy about how much swearing there was on television and no swearing before a certain hour at night. What the definition of swearing was, nobody was ever too sure, and they always had funny definitions, like I wouldn't want my mother to hear that, or I wouldn't want my daughter to read that book, or the definition of pornography is you know it when you see it. These are the sort of definitions that people are always working on. And now it seems to have relaxed a lot. And I think the problem with swearing, as far as I can tell, is when it becomes a form of inarticulateness, like not being able to say something very precisely. So it becomes annoying when someone swears too much because they can't think what to say. I'm not sure whether everybody else thinks that, but
yeah, sure. It's when the swear words are used like a kind of joker in cards, right? To replace the card you haven't got. So you don't know the words, so you just use some expletive instead, right? Something like that.
Yes. But still, I am a teacher, so even in Spanish, I don't allow the use of those terms in my classroom because you're supposed to be proper all the time. Although with my friends, with my friends, if for any reason I mash my fingers with the door, of course, I'm not going to say, Jesus, I'm going to say the worst things that you could ever imagine, because of the pain, but there is it's a different context.
Yes, for sure.
Yes, that's right. Speaking of wildcards, I mean, of course, in Chilean Spanish, there are these very useful words, huevada, and huevón, which can replace almost any other word in the language.
Yeah.
So
I'm not responsible for those words. I try not to, for me, I grew up in a house where the breadwinner was my mother. So she was a teacher, very formal. She would not allow us to use bad words. So I grew up over there. But then when I went to the army, for example, it was all the opposite. And I was like, gosh, these guys never had a mother with them. But I have to be the same all the time. I try not to use them, and I try not to make them natural, because they have and they carry a connotation. And as a teacher, I have this position, this stance where I would stay and I would be the same all the time. Like, this is what I am, and I want you to respect what I do, and no bad words in my house or no bad words in my classroom. Okay, and with teachers, we all try to do the same. Okay.
very good. Can I ask about this general cultural perception of English where in Temuco in the south of Chile? I mean, just thinking that, in Mexico, say, which is very close to the United States, English is obviously a very useful acquisition, but at the same time, it comes with a bit of kind of bitterness, doesn't it? America's this kind of horrible empire, interfering with everybody. I think, when the World Trade Center was destroyed in 2001, a lot of Mexicans were cheering in the streets. But in the south of Chile, the United States is quite a long way away, isn't it? So I imagine the perception is different.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I think we are running out of time, I guess.
Yeah, I got a notice saying that. Yeah, we've been upgraded. Apparently, we're allowed more than 40 minutes now, so we can continue it. It seems.
Okay. Well, the USA in Chile is quite popular, to be honest. Some people, but it has more like a politic connotation. They don't like the US because they see it like an empire, and they see it like it is invading our country and imposing their culture and everything. But people like Starbucks a lot. People like everything from the US. And I mean, what I see, honestly, I see different countries in Chile. My coffee is from Colombia and from Brazil, and I have no problem with that, which is the best coffee. I had peanut butter, some other stuff from the US. Some of my noodles are Chinese. And for me, it's not really a problem, right? Now, of course, there are some things that you could see in American culture that we would never do years ago, like celebrating, for example, Halloween. You don't even understand that. I mean, I don't even know where. I know that in a general way because I study the culture, but I don't know if we should be even celebrating that. It does not really represent who we are. It's like celebrating the 4th of July, for example. It has nothing to do with us. And I totally understand that. I would respect that. I would respect any other independences of any other country, but I don't think that I should celebrate that, personally speaking, because it doesn't really bother to me anymore.
I think it's part of a general. I think it's part of a general trend in the world towards celebrating anything that can possibly be celebrated, and perhaps shows that people have got too much spare time or something.
But there is a reason why we celebrate Halloween both in Chile and in Brazil, the only two countries in the world where it's a national holiday, and that's because there are so many Catholic holidays during the year that a few years ago it was decided to have one for the Protestant or evangelical, as we say, people here. And of course, it's not Halloween, it's the day of the Reformation when Martin Luther announced the beginning of his split from the Catholic Church. So the wider public interprets it as Halloween, and that's the reason why it's a big holiday in Scotland and in parts of Ireland and the United States. But it actually is supposed to stand for this minority of people in Chile. But the wider public doesn't.
You're right. You're right. Well, it is associated to a religion, a perspective, let's say, today. But still, people would see it. Oh no, that is from the USA. That is a tradition that we shouldn't be celebrating. And for me, we try to do it because in school, for example, we try to celebrate Canada's Independence Day. We try to celebrate, I don't know, England's Independence Day, or we try to.
I haven't got one. Brexit, maybe.
We never. I'm afraid we never succeeded in getting rid of the Normans, so we don't have an Independence Day. I'm afraid they're still there. You know.
Okay.
And Australia is still, you know, it's. I don't know whether Australia is independent or not. Nobody knows. We're between masters.
Look, do you know that there was a crisis, or there was like a dictatorship in Chile many years ago? I think it was in 1978. And Australia and Canada were like the first two countries that decided to accept Chileans politics refugees. Is that a technical name for that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And so that's why English-speaking communities became popular, because once the dictatorship was over, some of the people returned to Chile, and they created this bond with Canada and Australia. So most of the teachers and people decide to go to Australia or Canada, especially in Calgary, Canada, and in several cities in Australia too, because there was like people are grateful to these countries for what they did, even though you may not share their political views. But it's always nice to be grateful to someone who did something for you. In this case, so people would respect a lot of the English-speaking communities because of that.
Well, I remember my grandmother's house in Melbourne. She had Chilean immigrant neighbors, and they had a plum tree. Basically what you would call here just the normal dark-colored ciruela, the big one. In Australia, it's called Santa Rosa, and I've never seen it called Santa Rosa in Chile. But her neighbors called this tree Santa Rosa because they came from a town called Santa Rosa. And, and they had the most wonderful plum that nobody else had, which came from Chile in the 70s.
Nice. I have a friend in Canada, and he always sends photos about apples from Chile and wines from Chile as well. He's got a lot of friends from Chile. And he is in the area where English is spoken, because the other half is more French speaking. And well, it's interesting to, do you have a bilingual country there, Quite interesting.
Yes, or at least bilingual. I mean, a lot of places they're still speaking the indigenous languages in the north of Canada. So, and also there's a huge immigrant population. There's people from all around the world in Canada and Australia.
I was gonna say that, for example, in Chile, when it comes to learn a new language, English is popular, but we are surrounded by Spanish-speaking countries. Okay, so I can do business with my neighboring country, Argentina, let's say, and I wouldn't even need English at all, right? We use informal Spanish, we can communicate effectively. Or I can even go to Brazil. Even those guys speak Portuguese, but we can totally understand each other without reading subtitles. I don't know why, because I believe because of the Romance and language heritage. And, you know, from Mexico downwards, everybody speaks Spanish.
That's
So there's not really a reason to speak English unless you want to be a businessman, you want to study in the US, or you want to study medicine in another country, and you need English for very specific purposes, because that is what is being called English for specific purposes right now. That is when you got into the language, you know. And this is the reason that some people are learning English. I was working in a high school, for example, but then I also at night I would work at a private English institute, and then you got people really interested in learning the language because they had a purpose. I remember some of my students telling me that they wanted to go to, let's say, Canada and do a master's degree, but they needed English, right? Or some of them decided, okay, I'm going to travel the world, but I want to have a decent English so that I can communicate with others, you know? But it was very specific, and the approach is different because an English institute has the setting, has everything that the language can be taught, right? But schools, you've got many other extraneous, elements, like somebody knocking on your door looking for a student, the principal, or any other person, or you don't have the condition. Everybody, you've got many students in class. Still, the average per students per class still sort of 40 approximately. Private school would allow 20 students, but even though it's still too much, you cannot pay attention to 20 students' needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you are teaching a language, you need to be very careful because there are different types of students. Just imagine a classroom with 41 souls, everyone with their own dreams, with their own expectations, and you are trying to teach grammar, present perfect, for example. It's very hard, and it's hard for the math teacher, it's hard for the biology teachers, hard for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's natural to kids to misbehave, you know.
Absolutely. And since I suppose you're not allowed to beat them anymore, like in the old days, so discipline is not as easy to keep as it was once.
But enough nostalgia, Neil. Enough nostalgia.
Yes. That's right. Okay, we should probably keep this down to around an hour or so, which I think we must have probably hit by now. So probably we should be wrapping up, I think.
Okay.
But I hope we shall be speaking again, Miguel.
Okay, sure.
And it's been great to have you with us. Thank you for sharing all that you know, what you know about English in Chile, especially in the south, in Temuco. And thank you to everyone who's watched this, and I hope to see you again soon here on Chile.
All right. Thank you very much for this. And I promise next time I'm going to be more prepared with more technical things. Okay. And I know that I don't represent the whole English teaching community in Chile, but I mean, I can give you a hint of what is today in Chile.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, if you come better prepared, we'll have to come better prepared as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.
Many thanks. Thank you.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
You too.